Well, hello everybody, and a very warm welcome to this webinar to help you make the most of your application for the Princess Royal Training Awards in 2019. I'm Michael Osbald-Eston, and I'm joined by my colleague Remy Hugonleye from City and Guilds Group. You have to have an O in your surname to work on the programme. Say hello, Remy.
Hi, everyone.
And we're also joined today by our Deputy Chief Assessor, Fenella Talon, who's not here in the city with us on this rather cloudy day, but he's in the sunshine down on the south coast. So, hello, Fenella.
Hello, Michael.
That means Fenella's worked out how to unmute her button, which is excellent.
Yes, I have indeed.
Great to have you with us today, Fenella, and thank you for joining us. So, what are we going to do over the next half an hour or so? Well, first of all, we're obviously going to tell you about the Princess Royal Training Awards and how you apply for them. And we're going to give you 3 steps to make the most of the application. So hopefully by the end of the webinar, you'll have a better idea how to make a great application. We'll be sharing the awards timetable so you know when the deadlines are. And we have a collection of top tips that we've gathered over the past 3 years to help you focus on the things that really make a difference. And of course, we are here to answer your questions. And if you do have questions, please type them at any time during the webinar in the little box at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, and one of my colleagues will put them in front of me later on, and we'll then answer them. So between us, I'm sure we can answer them. If by any chance you think of a question and it's either too long to do that, or you want to have a proper chat about it, then there are phone numbers that you can ring and emails you can use to come in contact with us, and we're more than happy to pick up your questions individually later on. So, what are the awards? First and foremost, Remy's pointing at the screen and telling me to remind you that it's on the right-hand side of the screen. I did that. She obviously wasn't listening to that part, but at the right-hand side of the screen is where you give your questions, and we'll pick them up as we go along. So the awards, first and foremost, are an evidence-based award that focuses on the impact that training or learning development has on an organization and its people. It's not a winner takes all, it's about achieving a standard. So far we have, I think, almost 130 organizations have achieved the Princess Royal standard in terms of the impact that training's had both on their organizations and on the people who make up the organization. Now, the eligibility is worth having a little think about, because organizations come in all different shapes and sizes, as you can see from some of the ones that have actually achieved the awards on the screen. But it has to be the people who have benefited from the training or the learning and development have to either be employees or volunteers, or the employees within a group training organization where a number of employees have come together because either individually accessing training would be far too expensive, or where it's so specialized that you couldn't possibly expect training departments to have the ability to deliver to them. And we had a successful organization up in Cumbria last year who work in the nuclear industry, where frankly the amount of kit that you need to deliver that sort of training has to be shared amongst a number of employers, a number of companies. The awards are not primarily for organizations who simply deliver training, unless they're talking about the training that you provide to your people that then enable you to go on and deliver better quality training to other people. So it's about employers training up, upskilling, retraining their staff or their volunteers. Now, we use the word learning and development and training, or the words, in a fairly loose fashion, to be honest. It can be formal, it can lead to a qualification, or it can be completely informal. It can be short, it can be as little as a day if necessary, if that's had the desired impact, or it can be ongoing. So we can't find a single word that defines all the different sorts of training, all the different sorts of learning and development goes on. So we use this rather complicated phrase. But what we're looking for is organizations, employers, who are doing something with their staff, are their volunteers, that allow them then to be more effective, more productive, have better customer service, whatever it might be. But it's actually what's important to the organization, and that's what we're assessing you against, whether or not you achieved what you set out to achieve. We don't define what you have to achieve. You define it within the application, then show us the evidence that you've managed to do it. They are a robust program. The assessment is robust. It has to be, because you're going to get royal recognition, and also because we have the Sitting Guild's name associated with it too. You don't have to have any form of commercial relationship with the Sitting Guilds group to apply for one of the awards. And we're very clear on that. So we are a royal charter body. We are a charity in our own right. We have the royal charter to encourage the development of skills so that individuals, organizations and economies can grow. So you don't have to have any prior relationship with us to apply for one of these awards. And in fact, to demonstrate the independence of them, we actually outsource the assessment of them to an organization called MLR, who Fenella works for, and we don't assess them ourselves. So that's quite an important part of the ethos of the awards. The other thing to say is that we're trying to catch you in and not catch you out. So we're looking for reasons to celebrate the very best practice that's going on across the UK, bring it to other people's attention, celebrate it, recognize it, and use it, and allow people to build on it. So this isn't a matter of finding fault. This is actually a matter of finding opportunities to showcase excellence. They are free to apply for. There is no cost in applying for them. And if you're fortunate enough to receive one of our awards, or one of the Princesses Awards, then we'll invite you to an event. The last 3 have been at St. James's Palace, and we've had afternoon tea with the Princess. She's made the awards. And again, there is no cost incurred in that. There is a cost incurred in the time that you have to commit to preparing the application, and we recognise that, and therefore everybody who applies is given detailed feedback afterwards about their application form. So that, in a sense, constitutes consultancy in many ways, but there is no monetary cost in applying for the awards or in coming to the celebration, hopefully, when you get one. So afternoon tea with the Princess is something you can't buy, but the Princess Royal Training Award successful applicants do get to share that treat. And the cakes are to die for, by the way, as we all know, aren't they, Remy?
Yes,
Thank
absolutely.
You. So what are they based around, these awards? Well, we have 3 hallmarks, and these hallmarks are really the key and the core to the application form that you're going to complete. And the first is fairly straightforward, really. It's that training and learning development is integral to your organization. And that's the first hallmark. So you have to demonstrate to us that your organization is really committed to training and learning, developing the staff. The second hallmark is all about a program that's designed and delivered efficiently and effectively, and that it addresses the needs that you'd identified. So having identified a need, excuse me, or an opportunity, then you develop a program which addresses that, which upskills your staff and allows you as an organization to do something better than you'd done it before, and you've got evidence of that. And the third hallmark, and in some ways is the most important one, is that the program has an impact on the success of the organization and its people, and that you can evidence that to us. So we have an application form, obviously, and we also have this year a planner document, an application planner. Now, Remy, I believe, has sent everybody these 2 documents earlier today. You may have them in front of you. You may not. If you don't worry. I'm not going to go through them in great detail because that's quite difficult to do over a webinar. But I'm just going to reference the way that I think you should use those 2 documents to make the most of your application. The planner is really the place to put together your application and then cut and paste it into the actual application form afterwards. And the best thing to do is to really acquaint yourself with those 2 documents and to understand what's in them and to see how they work. So spend a bit of time doing that. You'll see in the planner, for each of the hallmarks, we give you a question. So for instance, the first hallmark, training, learning and development is integral to your organization. Part 1, what was the specific challenge or opportunity that you plan to address through staff or volunteer development? And why was training and learning and development chosen as the way to do this? So the first thing that you tell us in the application form, if you've applied before, this is a slight change because we turned around sections 1 and 2 in the first hallmark. First thing you tell us about is the program that you're putting forward for the award. And you tell us what the aims and objectives are, and you tell us why the need was identified. And within the guidance document, you'll see that there are criteria. You'll also see in the guidance document the marking that relates to the criteria. So for instance, in Hallmark 1, there are 2 criteria. Each is worth 5 points. And if you go through the various criteria in each of the hallmarks, you can get a clear view as to how important those criteria are by the way that they're marked. What we also do in the guidance document or the planning document is tell you what sorts of evidence we're looking for. Now, Fenella is going to talk about evidence a little bit later on, so I'll leave her to do that. But these are evidence-based. So you can make great claims in the application form, but you have to back it up with evidence. So all the way through the planning document, we tell you what the criteria are, we give you space to build your answers, and we tell you the sort of evidence that you should attach to make sure that we can see exactly what you're telling us and how you brought that into fruition. You decide what the evidence is, you decide the story you tell us, you decide what's important to you, you decide what the metrics were you're aiming for. We don't dictate any of that. We're asking you to tell us what was it that you were aiming to achieve, how were you going to measure it, what was the evidence that you can put against that, and what impact did it have. So the ball's in your court. We provide a framework for you to tell us a story. We provide a framework that allows you to attach the evidence to substantiate the claims that you're making in the application form, and that's really quite an important part of it. Now, also in the application form, there are a couple of other sections, one of which we'll talk about later, which is about sharing best practice. But right at the beginning of the application form, we ask you questions about whether you're public or private, what sector you're in, how big are you, where you're based, things like that. Now, actually, those have absolutely no bearing whatsoever on whether you get an award or not. It just helps us to target some of our marketing. So if we notice that we're not getting enough applications from one part of the country, we can do something about it. So last week I popped up to Gateshead to run an additional workshop in Gateshead at Gateshead College, because we know the Northeast, for instance, doesn't appear to put in as many applications as we'd expect in terms of the number of businesses and employees up there. Equally, we're off to Cardiff next week because we're really keen to encourage more applications from Wales. So these workshops are all around the country. We're running workshops around the country, and we'll target them. Also, on that first page of the application form, we ask for a description of your organisation and your purpose and vision. Now, that's obviously not marked, but it gives the assessors a really good overview as to who you are, what you do, and why you do it. So because there are a limited number of words throughout the application form, you have to use your words really, really carefully. So you can tell us in that first section about who you are and what you do to set up the assessors to understand why you're about to present the application that you have. But you know, there are some real benefits in applying for the awards. We research the people who get them quite carefully afterwards, and 77% of people who've got the awards say it really does help with the recruitment and retention of staff. Now, that's tremendous, but I suppose it demonstrates, if you get an award, that you are investing in your people. That helps recruit. We also find, and this should be of interest to everybody in the L&D world, half the organisations who get the award get an increase in their budgets to invest into further development of their people. That's got to be worth having. So it provides the independent evidence to go to your board and say, look, we're doing a great job, and it's not us that's saying it. The Princess Royal is saying we're doing a great job. So not many people choose to argue with Princess Royal. So these awards actually provide you with that evidence. And we also know the external validation of the benefit of applying for an award and being recognised for the work you're doing is not only motivating, but it's really impactful, really empowering for you, for your teams, and for the people who benefited from it. So, Remy, do you want to just summarise what we're looking for in the application form?
Yes, thank you, Michael. Just to summarise, really, and simply put, just like what Michael have said to you since the start of the webinar, what we're looking for from you is a story on why you did what you did. So what exactly was the rationale behind the training program that you developed to tackle whatever issue you have? You may not even have any issues whatsoever. You need to tell us why you did what you did. And to tackle that second hallmark, this is where you tell us how you did it. What did you use? Did you use any new systems? Was there anything innovative about the development and the delivery of the program? Did you take into account inclusivity of your people? Was everyone in the organization, was the training open to them? How did you do that training? Tell us all about it. And finally, Michael said already, what is the impact? What was the impact to the organization and your people? This is really important for you to show us. Then it just shows us that you're starting the story from A to Z. You're telling us a whole story. So that's just basically, to summarize, this is what the assessors will be looking for when they flip through your application.
Thanks, Remy. As we said, evidence is absolutely critical to the awards, and the evidence is the thing which the assessors are looking for and which they use to draw out whether or not you've achieved the standard of excellence required for the award. So, Fenella, do you want to tell us about the evidence, please?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Yes, as Michael said earlier, this is an evidence-based awards. So you get in each of the hallmarks the opportunity to give a narrative and tell us a story about what you did with your training, how you did it, and what the impact was. But you need to support all of that with evidence. And we allow you to upload a document per hallmark. So you get 3 documents that you can upload to back up the statements that you've said in your application. So it's to reinforce what you've said, and it's to provide us with evidence like charts, like baseline data, sometimes quotes from applicants or quotes from employees. So it gives you get a little bit more word count as well in the attachments that you can upload. So actually you do get 1,500 more words that you can add to your application through the attachments. Please don't give us any external links or videos or anything like that in the attachments because we won't be able to view them. But basically what you're doing with the evidence is backing up what you've said and giving the assessors enough so that we can then visit you, because that's the next stage in the process. The first stage is the paper-based application. And then if you get through that stage, so if there's enough there and we can see that the training has had a real impact on your organisation, the assessors will then come and visit you. So we'll then have the opportunity to talk to you, to perhaps see what you're doing, to talk to your learners, your employees. So that's what you're aiming to do with your application. So getting the evidence right is really key. Also, I'd say use extracts from documents that you've got within your organisation for the evidence, because again, 500 words per attachment isn't a great deal. So if you just give us salient extracts to support what you've said in your application, that would be great. As long as you refer to something in the attachments or within the body of the text in the application form, then the assessor can then consider that. So it's important to refer to things. We know that you can't put your whole annual report in there or your whole L&D policy, but if you refer to it, then we know it exists and we can ask you about it further if we come to visit you. I think as well, you need to actually refer to something. If we do come to visit you and then you give us additional evidence that we haven't really come across in the application, we then can't actually take it into account. So that's really important. We have had that in a couple of visits where actually they've given us really, really good evidence at the visit, but it hasn't actually referred back to the application. So we couldn't actually take it into account. But make sure your evidence sort of brings your application to life. It supports what you've said, and it gives the assessor more of a richness to look at in your application.
Thank you very much indeed, Fenella. And just to repeat, if it's not in the application, then the assessors can't look at it when they come and do the validation visit. What you're trying to do in the application is to tempt the assessors to come and have a look at what's happening on the ground. That's by far the best way of doing it. So one of the things we do ask in the application form is how can we share what you've learned? And one of the things that Princess is particularly keen about is people not reinventing the wheel and sharing best practice and learning from one another. And in fact, to do that, we've established an alumni of organisations who got the Princess Royal Training Award, and we bring them together and people share ideas. And in fact, we had John Lewis Partnership and River Island in just before Christmas talking to 20 odd other companies about the programs they'd adopted and the impact that those programs had made on their success. So the getting the award is the opening of a door to sharing in a large learning and development community of people who are really delivering the very best of the best across the UK. And it's well worth being part of that community. It's well worth, I think, being seen as one of the thought leaders, one of the deliverers, one of the impactful organisations that's gained this recognition and that can demonstrate real impact. Great too in terms of raising profile. One of the organisations who won an award last year, Ayres Monsell School, who are doing some really good stuff on well-being in a primary school, are now working with the BBC Learning on a series of programs about how you increase young people's attainments whilst also reducing staff sickness through stress. So there are some real benefits, and that has come about because of their involvement in the Princess Royal Training Awards. So great opportunity to share bright ideas. If you look on the website and you see any of the companies that are listed on the website and you think, oh, I'm really interested in that, give us a shout. We'll put you in touch. We'll introduce you to people, and you can have a chat about how they've addressed challenges and opportunities through developing their staff. So the alumni community, the community of excellence is becoming really important for us, but even more important for the people who are part of it and who can drive genuine benefit from it. So that's why we ask you about sharing best practice. You know, it's great if you develop something and somebody stands on your shoulders and sees even further. Then you know that's one of the great things that being the head of the game can actually provide for you. Now the awards timetable is important. Remy, when are the deadlines? Because I can never remember the dates, as you know.
So the deadlines are the 29th of March. And as you can see on the screen, so this is the timetable. So we really start to get engagement around the cycle from October, November, stroke December. So right now, applications are open. They opened on the 2nd of January, and they opened until the end of March, like I said earlier. So we're doing a whole series of engagement activities through the course of this application open period. So webinar is one of them. We're running a few workshops as well. We had our first series of workshops. We had one in London. Michael has been all over the country delivering workshops as well. So that would happen through to March as well. During the course of the end of March, there will also be opportunities to speak to the assessor team, to speak to the chief assessor. If you have any questions, we're all here at any time to answer your questions. And once the application closes in March, that would then we go through the first stage of assessment. So you submit your paper form or online application, then the assessor team through April and June really go through the first stage of the assessment. So that's the scoring, the assessing the scoring and the ranking that happens. And then towards the end of May, we have what we call a moderation meeting. And then towards the end of June, we notify everyone about the first stage of the assessment process. So this is where those organizations that are progressing to the next stage, the stage that Fenella mentioned earlier, the validation visit stage, this is where we notify you. And then you receive letters from the assessor team who would tell you what areas they would like to see, what evidence they would like to see during the visit. The visit would usually last 2 to 3 hours. So the assessor team will tell you who they would like to speak to in the organization. Those learners that have gone through the training, or your volunteers that have gone through the volunteering program, or whatever it is your training is, and whoever is being beneficiary of that training, the assessor team will tell you who they would like to speak to, and who they would also like to speak to in the learning and development team. They may like to speak to senior team members in your team. They would give you all that information. And then after that whole validation visit stage, this is where the commission meet. It's also very important to note here that HRH herself sits on the commission panel. So they meet around July sometime, and then they decide who would receive the awards in the year. So when the assessors visit you, they don't actually make the final decision. They don't make the final decision. So they make recommendations to the commissioned team, and then when they sit, then they decide who the awards should go to. And the ceremony goes on in the autumn. So this is where, but before the ceremony, sometime in September, we would gather together those organizations that have received the standard, and then we have a day of workshop where we share tips with you on how to shout about your win. We also share with you toolkits about what you can do through social media to promote your win, to promote what you do. Michael talked earlier about sharing best practice. So we talk to you about what you can do, and we bring you together with other organizations who are also standard receivers. And then the ceremony happens in the autumn. Michael mentioned earlier about the last 3 years having been in St. James's Palace. So this year, hopefully, we would get the palace again, but we would, let you know all that information should you be successful. So I'll hand over to Michael now.
Thank you. Thank you, Remy. And just moving into the top tips land in the last few minutes of the webinar. These are things we've gathered over the years. But one of the most important things is you're telling a story. It's got to be a narrative. It's got to flow. So do get somebody who's not been involved in putting it together to read it through to see if it makes sense to them. If it makes sense to them, it'll probably make sense to the assessors. But it's really important, I think, to get somebody to run through it and see if it does. Keep the enthusiasm you've got for what you've done in it. Don't let so many people fiddle with it that you lose the energy and the enthusiasm and the passion. And obviously, use the criteria to steer the answers that you're giving, and try and avoid jargon. Every industry has jargon, and sometimes you have to do it. But don't forget, the assessors won't necessarily be experts in your technical field, so try and use plain language, or at least explain jargon. Maybe even put it into the evidence if it's things that you think people won't understand. Show the evidence, the links to the evidence in the application form, and probably the most important top tip. And we had Openreach here a couple of weeks ago doing a presentation as part of our last workshop, and they said they wished they'd asked for help in the first year they applied, because they would have been successful in the first year then. Asking for help is not a weakness, it's actually a very sensible thing to do. There's a lot of expertise you can call into here, and we're more than happy to share it with you. Now, Fenella, standing in as you are as Deputy Chief Assessor, what top tips do you have from the assessor point of view?
Well, really, thanks, Michael. It's going back to the evidence. So your claims of excellence and information about what you've done must be supported by evidence, because that's what the assessor team are looking for. And also avoid any generalities. We want the specifics about actually what you've done. So stick to the criteria that are mentioned in the planner. And if you follow those and answer those, then the assessors will mark you on that. And actually, we do use marks. We are scoring the various parts of the form. So bear that in mind. And the application is the key to a visit, and that's the best part for us, because we actually get to see you and talk to you about what you've done. Please don't repeat anything or provide any unnecessary detail. I'm sure you won't do that anyway, because the word count is so tight that you need to use every word really effectively. And it's the same assessor who looks at your whole application form, so you don't need to repeat anything within it, because you've got the same person looking at it. It's not one assessor does one hallmark and then another assessor does another hallmark. It's your application will be looked at in a holistic way by the assessor, and just provide, as I was saying before, brief extracts. Quotations, if you have them, are always good. Information about case studies. So let us know if you've got a case study, then we can ask you more about that if we come and visit you. So good luck with it, and keep at it and get someone to read it through, as Michael was saying. That's really important, because sometimes you can miss something that's really key. So that's it, and do ask for help as well. It's not a weakness.
Thanks very much indeed, then. The team are here to help you, and ourselves are here, and we're very happy to provide whatever support and guidance you might need to put together a successful application form. The assessors are available. We do our absolute best to help you succeed. Obviously, not everybody is successful, and we do provide quite detailed feedback if you're not. But if you're applying for a second time, really read through the feedback you've had from the first one, and look at the things that are suggested. Now, we have got some workshops coming up. We are out and about next week. We're in Birmingham, Manchester, and Cardiff. I'm off to Edinburgh later on, and then we've got another another workshop here in London at the end of February. So if you want to join in any of those workshops, they're obviously all free. Just go online onto the website and you can book a place on them, and you'll be very welcome. So we go through the application form in detail, we go through the planning document in detail, and you get lunch, so it can't be bad, although not champagne and sandwiches on this occasion. But they are the ones we've done so far in Belfast and in London and in Gateshead have been thoroughly enjoyable. Well, they have to me anyway. I've had a great time, even in the snow in Newcastle. So we are very happy to answer questions, and if you've got questions, then you can still send them in, or you can email them to us afterwards. One of the questions that has popped up relates to the metrics, and it says, what metrics are you after? What are you actually after? What do you want us to tell us? And the answer to that really is you need to tell us what's important to you. Because it's what's important to you that we're measuring you against. We're not imposing things on you. We're simply asking you to tell us what's important to you, and what sort of things were important in terms of identifying the successfulness of the initiative that you developed. Now, Fenella, I mean, we have to talk about baselines and percentages. As an assessor, what do baselines and percentages mean to you?
The baselines allow us to see where your starting point was. So we want to see the before and then the after picture. So the baseline helps us see where you were before you started the training or the learning and development or whatever it was that you did. So that's really important. And also we'd like to know, what were you hoping for? So in terms of the baseline, were you hoping for a 10% uplift, or were you hoping for an increase in employer engagement, or what was it that you were trying to achieve? So it is important. Give us the before story.
And there's another question here. It's quite an interesting one. It's about cause and effect. Now, we know that Paul, the chief assessor, always talks about the audit trail. And linking effectiveness and impact to what's actually happened. Can you just run us through that as an assessor, please, Fenella?
Yes, well, that's similar to the baseline. Actually, it's showing us what your story was before, what you wanted to achieve, and then did it actually happen? So it's providing us with details and evidence that you actually did what you hoped to do. So yes, it's whatever evidence is specific to your organisation. So sometimes that can be evidence from a sector that is external information to you, and you wanted to improve something specific within your organisation using that external sort of lens. So yes, I don't know if that answers the question actually.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I think the other interesting question we've had about whether people whether it's too early to apply, and I think that's something we've begun. In a sense, we've got better at that over the 3 years. If people aren't sure whether they've got sufficient evidence to apply or whether it's too early, then we're always very, very happy to have a conversation. So drop us an email, give us a call, and we'll chat it through. And if you present to us what you've got, we'll say, actually, we think that you can build that evidence up better for next year. We'll be quite honest, we don't want you to spend time doing things that won't deliver a benefit to you. But do give us a ring, give us a chat, have a chat, and we'll talk to you about it. Remy, you've got a point.
Yes, I think you covered it earlier. I just wanted to stress on that point that especially when it comes to the ROI part of the evidence, people find it really difficult to understand that sometimes. But Michael would always say, even in the workshop, that return on investment is down to you as an organization. What was it that you were trying to measure before you delivered this training, or before you decided to go through the LMD pathway? And how have you measured that? It doesn't necessarily have to be monetary. It could be in terms of time for you. So if you're putting forward a program that is a volunteer program, it may not necessarily have much to do with money. So the ROI part of the evidence is down. It's your ROI. What that term means to you.
Thanks, Remy. Yeah, that's a really good point to make. So yeah, what's important to you? What are you trying to achieve? And then tell us how you've done it. So that's really important. So like I say, if you've got questions and you haven't managed to send them in, please email them to us, give us a call, and if Remy presses a button, you'll see there are some numbers that you can contact us on. Can I thank everybody for joining in the webinar today? And we really do look forward to receiving your application. We look forward to hearing your calls or your emails. We're very happy to help and support. I never wish people good luck, because these awards are not down to luck. They're down to people presenting the evidence to support their application. But we do hope that you find the process itself useful in terms of reviewing what you've been doing within your organisation. And we're always very happy, as we said, to support and to guide and to help whenever possible. So thank you for being with us today on this slightly blustery day in London town. Sunny day down in Brighton for Fenella, so I think you win. I know we've got people on the webinar from all over the country. I don't think anybody's deep in snow anymore. I think the snow's all gone. So I hope you all have a very good afternoon, and thank you for joining us, and thank you from the City and Guilds group to you. Goodbye.